let me be very clear, because Joe has been doing a pretty good job of grossly misrepresenting what I've stood for and what I've said. First of all, my dad is 80 years old. My mom is of the same generation. They rely on Social Security, and they have since they retired. I would never do anything that would jeopardize the benefits of people who are retired or close to retirement. When I was a member of the House, I sponsored legislation that would make it out of order for Congress to even consider legislation that would cut the benefits of retirees. Joe Sestak hasn't sponsored any such legislation. But I've also looked at the reality that we face as a nation, the fiscal challenges that we face, and the demographic reality that we face. And I want to make this program last for future generations. To do it, we're going to have to make some changes. And we could offer young people some reforms within Social Security so that this program can be viable. The real jeopardy to Social Security is the reckless spending of Joe Sestak, $1.5 trillion deficits that he's voted for, $3.3 trillion of new debt. The interest service on this debt alone is going to jeopardize our ability to honor our commitment, and that's outrageous.
Mr. Sestak?
Congressman Toomey's book says two things. In an election, truth is the first casualty, and once again it was. I've sponsored legislation to put Social Security in a lockbox. Second is, in his book, when you look it up, and you go through his book where he says privatize Social Security, what he says is, if then the market goes down and people are wiped out of their savings, that's the risk they take. Billions of dollars, however, of wealth accumulation will be given to those brokers that invest Social Security. Congressman Toomey, what I don't understand is why are you advocating taking what's a social network for our seniors and risking it on the stock market, where we just had an example of where when the stock market goes down, seniors lose their Social Security, whether it's today or whether it's in the future. And that's the difference between us. You're with the corporations in Wall Street. I'll be with us, the people.
Joe's demagoguery knows no limits, apparently. I've argued, for instance, that Vanguard, a Pennsylvania company, it's not on Wall Street. Vanguard is not a for-profit company. There'd be no profits. But they manage hundreds of billions of dollars, and with a properly regulated and diversified portfolio, I think a lot of young people would choose the option that I would offer. Joe has no solutions for this. Joe has no solutions for the big problems that we face. Instead, it's mischaracterize, dishonest attacks, and if he gets close to a solution, it's always the same. Raise taxes, and in the case of Social Security, cut benefits. There are no other options. The kind of spending that he's engaged in, that he has advocated, is the single biggest threat to all of our retirement programs, as well as to the health of the country. But I think there's a better way to go.
Vernon Odom, your question first to Mr. Toomey.
Mr. Toomey, abortion. Is Roe v. Wade stare decisis, or would you, if elected, work to further undermine it or knock it out completely? Two, in terms of affirming judicial appointments all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, would you vote to affirm anybody who was not in your camp on that issue?
Well, you've put a lot on the table all at once. Let me start with the first issue. Abortion's a tough issue, and it's one, there's good people on both sides of this. My views are consistent with that of a majority of the congressional delegation and the other senator from Pennsylvania. I'm pro-life. And I would accept a ban on abortions with the exceptions of rape and incest and the life of the mother. I think Roe versus Wade was mistakenly determined, and I would support its repeal. But I've never advocated that we have a litmus test for judges. I think instead that what we ought to do is examine a judge's qualifications. When now Justice Sotomayor was first suggested, nominated by President Obama, many of my colleagues, many Republicans, thought we should simply reject her candidacy. I deemed her to be quite capable and competent, and I advocated endorsing her. Joe Sestak is the one who is extreme on this issue. He is in that fringe of members, very liberal, who believe in taxpayer-funded abortion on demand and no restrictions at all, well outside the mainstream of Pennsylvania.
Mr. Sestak.
Palin, Toomey, O'Donnell, they all would like to overturn Roe versus Wade. I believe that those life decisions of a family should be made within the family. I don't think government should intervene. And I respect precedents on the Supreme Court. I think there's even more of an extreme taken by Congressman Toomey on such social issues than others. Congressman Toomey actually opposes protecting a victim of hate crimes. Congressman Toomey's idea of gun control, he said, is a steady aim. 20% increase in murders of our law enforcement officers were due because they happen to have a military assault weapon. I don't think our law enforcement officers should have to go up against what we in the military had to, as the Army and the Marine Corps did in Iraq. I think those views with O'Donnell and others are too extreme for mainstream Pennsylvania.
Mr. Toomey, if you want to rebut, now's your chance.
Well, again, the extreme view is the view held by the tiny minority in Congress, in Pennsylvania, in American society that believes there should be no restrictions whatsoever. Taxpayers should fund abortions, as Joe Sestak advocates. Partial birth abortion should be permitted, as he advocates. He's taken the most liberal positions on many things. He doesn't respect the right of law-abiding citizens to own firearms in many ways. It's Joe Sestak who has views that are simply well outside the mainstream.
Mr. Sestak.
I voted against taxpayers funding it, and you know it, Congressman.
You did not, Joe.
Yes, I did. Please don't interrupt.
Well, but when you're
Number two.
being dishonest, Joe, I'm going to call you on it.
May I have my time back?
Go ahead.
Congressman Toomey, I voted against it. Number two, I so respect the Second Amendment. I've lived my entire life, 31 years in the U.S. military, with weapons. I respect those 1 million hunters in Pennsylvania, the first day of hunting, go out and do what families do in Pennsylvania. But I do believe that there is community safety that has to be taken. You voted against an increase for our law enforcement officers. But I voted against that amendment.
Well, the record is very clear, and everybody can look this up, and you will see that Joe is either seriously misremembering or simply being dishonest. I'm pleased that I have the endorsement of the State Troopers Association of Pennsylvania, the FOP, the Philadelphia FOP. That makes it very clear about my support for law enforcement.
Mr. Sestak, have to give you another 10, 12 seconds of rebuttal.
Yes, let me just talk about spending. When Congressman Toomey went to Congress, he actually voted to remove the requirement that government had to live within its means. You want a new program? Cut it. Cut another one. Because of that, he left behind, when he left Congress, the largest deficit in the history of America. Now he wants to finger point because we had to vote to get that requirement back into law, which we did.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Sestak, this question is for you. And I want to pick up on your conversation about the Second Amendment and gun control. Under current U.S. law, people on the terrorist watch list are barred from getting on airplanes, but they can buy guns or explosives. And the government accounting office has found that in the last The government accounting office has found that in the last 6 years, 1,000 people on the terrorist watch list have actually been able to buy guns and explosives. Given the fact that we now know that Al-Qaeda seems to be changing tactics and is moving more towards small-scale urban attacks using guns and explosions, should the law be changed so that people on the terrorist watch list cannot buy guns or explosives?
Yes. Look,